Hello, everybody. This is Pastor Eric Lee of the Springfield Baptist Church. Every February here at Springfield, we like to conduct in the atrium of our church what we call a museum of African American history. It is a place where we seek to display information and to retrieve a part of our history that many of us have never learned or never read about, or the oral tradition never passed down our way concerning. About 3 years ago, we did an exhibit on Black entrepreneurship. And it was in that exhibit in 2018 that we learned about Black Wall Street, where we learned about the riots in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and the loss of a vibrant, growing, prosperous African American community in Greenwood, Oklahoma. This year is the 100th anniversary. This May and June is the 100th anniversary of the riots that destroyed Black wealth, Black businesses, Black families. In recent months, mass graves have been discovered in Greenwood, Oklahoma, that recognize all of the turmoil and all of the travail that resulted as a result of Black prosperity. As we continue to grapple as a nation with the insurrection and the mob of January the 6th, I think it's important for us to appreciate that mob violence is not new to this nation. It's not new to our country, and it continues to be a problem that Christians need to face. Earlier this month, I began reading a book entitled White Rage, where a historian at Emory University, Dr. Carol Anderson, she wrote this book about how every time in the nation's history, there appeared to be Black prosperity, Black success, Black achievement, where there was a favorable Supreme Court case that Blacks benefited from. There was always white resistance, and there was always white violence. She calls it white rage. She begins with Reconstruction all the way to the Great Migration through the 1950s, when we were given the Brown versus the Board of Education case that ended separate but equal, through the Civil Rights Movement, and even through the election of Barack Hussein Obama. It's a very thorough history book. It's entitled White Rage. I encourage you to read more, to learn more. As we retrieve these stories and these narratives about African American history, it's important that you become a student. As we seek to develop social justice ministry here at Springfield, it's important to contextualize our story, and this video has been designed with that in mind. I pray that it is a blessing to you, that you are enlightened and empowered by it. God bless you. So in lieu of our inability to meet and to have our Museum of African American History, we present to you this video.
Founded in 1906 on Indian territory, the Black district of Greenwood, Oklahoma was a thriving community. It has been reported that the largest number of Black townships after the Civil War were located in Oklahoma. Between 1865 and 1920, African Americans founded more than 50 Black townships in the state. According to the Tulsa Historical Society and Museum, during that time, Oklahoma was being promoted as a safe haven for African Americans after emancipation. On Greenwood Avenue, also known as Black Wall Street, there were luxury shops, restaurants, grocery stores, hotels, jewelry and clothing stores, movie theaters, pharmacies, barbershops and salons, a library, pool halls, nightclubs, and offices for doctors, lawyers, and dentists, all owned by African Americans. Greenwood even had its own school system, post office, a savings and loan bank, hospital, bus system, and taxi service. Greenwood was also home to far less affluent African Americans as well. A significant number still worked in blue-collar jobs as janitors, dishwashers, porters, and domestics. But the money they earned outside of Greenwood was spent within the district. According to the Tulsa Historical Society, it is said within Greenwood, every dollar would change hands 19 times before it left the community. Now, with all of this black prosperity, it wasn't long before the affluent African Americans attracted the attention of local white residents, who resented the upscale lifestyle of people they deemed to be an inferior race. Basically, they were jealous of how they were living and believed they didn't have a right to have their own property and wealth. And during that time, the resurgence of the Ku Klux Klan was very high profile. Blacks in Greenwood already feared racial violence and the removal of their voting rights. This was also during the time when lynchings proliferated across the country and anti-black riots erupted in major cities across the United States. Tulsa's dark chapter unfolded when Dick Rowland, a 19-year-old black shoe shiner, was arrested for the attempted sexual assault of a 17-year-old white elevator operator named Sarah Page on May 31st, 1921. To protect Rowland from being lynched, armed black men, many who were World War I veterans, stood guard at the courthouse where Rowland was being held. As tensions mounted, an angry crowd of white men arrived, and they outnumbered the black guards. Following this, in the early morning hours of June 1st, 1921, mobs of white men descended on Greenwood, looting homes, burning down businesses, gunning down and killing African Americans. Greenwood residents lost everything. Some fled, never to return, while others were relegated to living in tent camps and getting assistance from the Red Cross until they had the means and materials to rebuild. Though black residents filed $1.8 million in riot-related claims, they were all denied. One of the last surviving witnesses of the massacre gives her account of what happened.
My name is Olivia J. Hooker, and I may be the last survivor of the catastrophe in Tulsa. The black part of Tulsa was a neighborhood where you could be treated with respect. My father had a very nice store, Samuel D. Hooker and Son. It was a store that didn't carry shoddy things. They had Arrow shirts, Kuppenheimer suits, Florsheim shoes, and Stetson hats. And those were all good names in those days. It was May 31st, 1921. At first, we saw a bunch of men with those big pine torches come through the backyard. And I remember our mother put us under the table. She took the longest tablecloth she had to cover 4 children and told us not to say a word. It was a horrifying thing for a little girl that's only 6 years old, trying to remember to keep quiet so they wouldn't know we were there. When they left, they went on, to do more damage to people who lived beside us and down the hill. They tried to destroy every black business, school, and church. Our school, Dunbar School, was blasted with dynamite, and my father's store was destroyed. There was nothing left but one big safe. It was so big they couldn't carry it away, so they had to leave it in the middle of the rubble. To me, I guess the most shocking thing was seeing people to whom you had never done anything to irritate, who just took it upon themselves to destroy your property because they didn't want you to have those things, and they were teaching you a lesson. Those were all new ideas to me. But I guess that's part of the growing up process.
It is estimated over 300 people were killed and buried in mass graves in which no one acknowledged or discussed. In the 1990s, a commission was formed to investigate what happened. In 1998, a story broke about the possibility of mass graves of the victims of the 1921 massacre. Forensic archaeologists used ground-penetrating radar at various sites in the area and found anomalies consistent with mass graves in 3 locations in Tulsa. Due to discord with the Tulsa Riot Commission, the grave search was stopped in the early 2000s, and not until 2019 that the current mayor of Tulsa, Mayor G.T. Bynum, resumed the grave search. In early October 2020, archaeologists uncovered 12 graves that are believed to be the remains of the Tulsa Massacre victims. The search to locate the bodies is continuing. The Tulsa Race Massacre is considered one of the worst incidents of racial violence in American history.